Isaiah Monroe had been inside courtroom 14 for less than 6 minutes when the bailiff told him to leave. He had not shouted, interrupted the attorneys, or approached the wealthy family seated behind the polished oak table. He had simply entered through the public doors wearing a faded charcoal jacket, clean work trousers, and the heavy black shoes he used at the veterans' residence where he had lived and worked for almost 20 years. In his left hand, he carried a weathered document case. Inside his breast pocket was a military medal wrapped in an old white handkerchief. Isaiah had not planned to show either one unless the judge asked. But the moment Preston Vale saw him take a seat in the last row, he leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. The attorney turned. So did Preston's sister, Celestine Vale, and their younger cousin, Nolan Crestwick. Their father's probate hearing had not yet begun, but all three looked at Isaiah as though he had already committed a crime by entering the room. "That man has no standing here," Preston said loudly enough for the gallery to hear. Isaiah kept his eyes on the judge's empty bench. Bailiff Ronan Dade approached him. "Sir, this hearing concerns a private estate matter." "It concerns the Vale veterans' residence," Isaiah replied. "I manage the property." "You are an employee?" "Among other things." Ronan glanced toward the family's attorney, who shook his head. "You are not listed as a party or witness." Isaiah opened the document case slightly. "Attorney Althea Crow asked me to attend." "Ms. Crow is not present. Her train was delayed." Preston stood. He was 47, silver at the temples, and dressed in a navy suit that looked as if it had never been worn twice. "Your Honor's staff was already informed that Mr. Monroe has been dismissed from the residence. He has no reason to be here except to create a spectacle." The judge had not yet entered, but Preston spoke as if the courtroom belonged to him. His family owned newspapers, hotels, construction companies, and a private bank. For most of his adult life, rooms had adjusted themselves around his confidence. Isaiah looked directly at him. "You cannot dismiss me from a trust you do not control." Preston smiled. "There is no trust." Celestine gave a quiet laugh. Nolan looked down at his phone. Bailiff Ronan placed one hand near Isaiah's shoulder. "Sir, I need you to step outside." Isaiah did not resist. He rose carefully, protecting the document case beneath his arm. As he turned toward the aisle, Preston said, "Search the case. My father's papers disappeared after his death." Isaiah stopped. "Are you accusing me of theft?" "I am protecting my family's property." "Your family has spent a long time calling things yours before reading the documents." Ronan's expression tightened. "That is enough. Outside." He took Isaiah by the elbow. Isaiah pulled away, not violently, but with the instinctive movement of a man who had once learned never to let an unknown hand control his balance. The sudden motion opened his jacket. The handkerchief slipped from his breast pocket and fell to the floor. Something heavy struck the marble with a clear metallic sound. The white cloth unfolded. A bronze cross with an eagle at its center slid across the aisle and stopped beneath the first row. At that exact moment, the side door opened and Judge Sabine Merriweather entered the courtroom. Everyone rose. She was 63, tall, composed, and known for listening longer than attorneys found comfortable. She had spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor before becoming a judge and had presided over enough estate battles to understand that grief often disappeared the moment property entered the conversation. She stepped toward the bench, then stopped when she saw the medal on the floor. Her expression changed. "Do not touch that," she said. Bailiff Ronan froze. Judge Merriweather descended from the bench herself. She bent, not carelessly but with both hands, lifting the medal by its ribbon. She examined the dark blue ribbon edged in white and red, then turned the cross over. An engraved name appeared on the back. Her eyes moved from the medal to Isaiah. "Isaiah Benjamin Monroe?" she asked. Isaiah stood beside the aisle. "Yes, Your Honor." The room had gone completely silent. "United States Army?" "Formerly." "Distinguished Service Cross?" Isaiah looked uncomfortable with the attention. "Yes, ma'am." Preston's attorney rose. Your Honor, while Mr. Monroe's service is certainly admirable, it has no relevance to— Judge Merriweather looked at him. Counsel, I have not invited argument. He sat down. She wrapped the medal again and carried it to Isaiah. Why was this in your pocket? It belonged with the papers I brought. A Distinguished Service Cross does not usually belong with probate papers. This one does. Judge Merriweather studied him for a moment. Mr. Monroe, were you being removed from my courtroom? Bailiff Ronan cleared his throat. He was not listed as a participant, Your Honor. Did anyone ask my clerk whether he had been authorized to attend? No one answered. The judge turned toward Preston. Did you request his removal? Preston stood slowly. I informed the bailiff that Mr. Monroe was a former employee with no legal interest in my father's estate. Are you the court? No, Your Honor. Then you do not decide who has a legal interest before I hear the evidence. She handed the wrapped medal back to Isaiah. Take your seat, Mr. Monroe. Preston's jaw tightened. Isaiah returned to the last row. Judge Merriweather climbed to the bench, opened the case file, and looked across the courtroom. We will wait 15 minutes for Attorney Althea Crow. In the meantime, no one will be removed from this courtroom unless I order it. The dead man whose estate had brought them together was Hollis Vale, founder of Vale Meridian Holdings and one of the richest men in the state. Publicly, Hollis was known for building luxury hotels and restoring historic buildings. He donated to veterans' charities, attended military ceremonies, and regularly spoke about his father's service in World War II. His most praised charitable project was Haven Cross, a 40-room residence outside the city where injured veterans and their families could live while receiving treatment. Newspapers called it Hollis Vale's gift to those who had sacrificed for the country. The photographs always showed Hollis standing beneath the entrance sign, usually beside a flag and several uniformed men. Isaiah rarely appeared in those photographs. When he did, captions called him the groundskeeper. In reality, Haven Cross existed because Isaiah had refused to let Hollis Vale forget a promise made in a burning building 30 years earlier. Isaiah was 24 when he joined the Army. His father had died in a factory accident, leaving Isaiah's mother with medical debt and a small house she could barely maintain. Isaiah believed military service would provide stability, training, and a way to see more of the world than the industrial neighborhood where he grew up. He became a combat engineer and later specialized in route clearance and emergency extraction. He was not naturally fearless. Men who claimed not to feel fear usually made careless decisions. Isaiah felt fear clearly and learned to move while carrying it. During a deployment in the fictional conflict zone of Darwan Province, his unit was assigned to escort civilian engineers evaluating a damaged hydroelectric facility. One of those civilians was 36-year-old Hollis Vale, then an ambitious construction executive attempting to secure an international rebuilding contract. The convoy was attacked on a narrow road. The lead vehicle exploded. Hollis's armored transport rolled into a drainage channel and caught fire. Isaiah crossed open ground under gunfire, broke through the rear hatch, and pulled 3 people out. He returned for Hollis after an ammunition box began detonating inside the vehicle. By the time Isaiah dragged him beyond the wall of a ruined pumping station, Isaiah's uniform was burning at one sleeve and shrapnel had torn through his side. He then held the defensive position with 2 injured soldiers until helicopters arrived. He received the Distinguished Service Cross because he saved lives while exposed to extraordinary danger. Isaiah rarely wore it. He remembered the men who did not return more clearly than the ceremony where a general pinned metal to his chest. Hollis visited Isaiah during recovery. At first, the visit seemed sincere. He brought books, spoke to Isaiah's mother, and promised that Isaiah would always have a place in the Vale organization. You gave me my life, Hollis said. I won't repay that with a check and a photograph. Isaiah told him he wanted nothing. Hollis insisted. Several years later, when Isaiah left the Army with permanent nerve damage in his left leg and recurring injuries to his shoulder, Hollis offered him work supervising safety at Vale construction sites. Isaiah accepted because the position allowed him to support his mother. Over time, he discovered that Hollis's admiration came with limits. Hollis listened when Isaiah spoke about personal courage but became defensive when Isaiah questioned corporate decisions. He praised sacrifice at ceremonies but resisted paying subcontracted workers injured on veil projects. Isaiah confronted him after a hotel collapse killed 2 undocumented laborers whose families were offered tiny settlements. "You keep thanking veterans because the country has already decided their sacrifice is honorable," Isaiah said. "You do not know how to honor people when doing so costs you something." Hollis did not speak to him for 3 months. Then he called Isaiah to a vacant country property once used as a religious retreat. The buildings were deteriorating, but the land was quiet and close to the military hospital. "Tell me what this could become," Hollis said. Isaiah walked through the empty rooms and described a place where injured veterans could recover without their families losing homes or jobs. He proposed temporary housing, transportation, legal assistance, therapy, and training programs. Hollis listened. Haven Cross opened 4 years later. From the beginning, Isaiah ran it. He selected staff, developed rules, negotiated with hospitals, and slept in the maintenance cottage when storms damaged the roof or residents experienced crises. He drove veterans to appointments, sat with families during surgeries, repaired wheelchairs, and stopped more than one desperate man from making a permanent decision during a temporary night. Hollis provided money and influence, but Isaiah created the culture. At Haven Cross, no one was treated as a charity project. Residents helped cook, maintain gardens, tutor children, and support those arriving after them. The entrance plaque named Hollis Vale as founder. Isaiah objected once. Hollis said donors needed a recognizable name. Isaiah let it go because the beds remained open. The trouble began after Hollis's wife died and his children became more involved in the company. Preston considered Haven Cross an underperforming asset. The land had increased enormously in value as the city expanded. A developer offered nearly $60 million for the property, enough to build luxury apartments overlooking the river. Celestine suggested relocating the residents to cheaper housing farther away. Nolan proposed keeping one building as a museum and naming the development Valor Heights. Isaiah told them no. They laughed because he was speaking as though he had authority. Hollis, already ill with heart disease, delayed the sale but never clearly explained why. 6 months before his death, he asked Isaiah to meet him in the old chapel at Haven Cross. Hollis arrived without a driver and carried a black leather folder. "My children think this belongs to them," he said. "Does it?" Isaiah asked. Hollis sat beneath the plain wooden cross. "Not if I finally do what I promised." He showed Isaiah the original trust agreement. Haven Cross had not been funded solely by Hollis. After the war, the civilian engineers rescued in Darwan created a compensation fund. 2 soldiers' families contributed wrongful death settlements. Isaiah's mother donated the insurance payment she received after her husband's factory accident, despite Isaiah begging her not to. Isaiah himself invested nearly every military benefit and settlement he received after leaving the Army. Hollis supplied the largest amount, but the trust agreement gave equal moral control to its founding trustees and prohibited commercial sale unless every surviving founder agreed. Hollis had hidden the agreement inside a private company archive after his father warned that investors would view it as an unpredictable liability. For years, he managed Haven Cross as though it were his personal charity, even though it legally belonged to an independent trust. "Why hide it?" Isaiah asked. Hollis stared at the chapel floor. "Because I liked being thanked. The honesty was ugly enough to be real. And because my board would have challenged the trust when the land was worth less and no one was watching." Isaiah closed the folder, "Then record it properly." "I have." Hollis explained that attorney Althea Crow had registered the trust, updated its governing documents, and prepared a letter to be read during probate. Isaiah would become chairman after Hollis's death. The medal was part of the original trust property because Isaiah had placed it in the first fundraising display 30 years earlier as evidence of the event that created the founders' bond. Hollis had later removed it without permission and kept it in his private safe. "I am returning what I took," he said. "The medal and the truth." Isaiah accepted the medal, but not the apology. "You do not get credit for returning something because you finally became afraid your children would steal it." Hollis died 3 months later. Within 48 hours, Preston ordered a valuation of Haven Cross. Within 1 week, he issued notices stating that residents would be relocated within 90 days. He dismissed Isaiah for insubordination, financial opacity, and unauthorized representation of the Vale estate. Security arrived at Isaiah's cottage before sunrise and changed the administrative locks. Isaiah did not resist because veterans and their families were watching. He left with one suitcase, Hollis's leather folder, and the medal wrapped in his mother's handkerchief. Althea Crow filed an emergency challenge, but Preston's lawyers claimed the trust was forged after Hollis lost mental capacity. The first hearing would determine whether Haven Cross could be frozen until the court examined ownership. That was the hearing Isaiah had entered when Preston had him thrown out. Althea arrived 12 minutes after Judge Merriweather ordered the recess. She was 58, black, sharply dressed, and carried 2 rolling cases filled with documents. Her silver-framed glasses had cracked during the train delay, and one lens was held in place with clear tape. She apologized to the court, then looked at Isaiah in the last row. "Did they try it?" she asked quietly. "They tried." "Did you let them embarrass you?" "They embarrassed themselves." Althea placed the cases beside the counsel table. Preston's attorney, Cedric Baines, objected to Isaiah's presence again. Judge Merriweather overruled him. "Mr. Monroe may remain. Whether he has standing is one of the issues before us." Althea began by presenting the registered Haven Cross Stewardship Trust. It named 7 original trustees. 5 were deceased. The surviving trustees were Isaiah Monroe and Hollis Vale until Hollis's death. The agreement required that the property remain dedicated to veteran recovery, family housing, and medical transition services. Any sale required unanimous approval from all living original trustees and a court finding that the mission could no longer be fulfilled. Isaiah had never approved a sale. Preston's face changed when the judge read that clause. Cedric argued that the trust was invalid because the property deed remained in a Vale-controlled company. Althea produced a transfer document signed 28 years earlier assigning beneficial ownership to the trust. The document had been witnessed by Hollis, 2 military officers, and Reverend Marcella Hume, the former director of the retreat. The county had accepted the updated registration 7 months before Hollis died. "Convenient timing," Cedric said. Mr. Vale was severely ill. Althea placed medical evaluations on the table. Hollis had been examined by 2 independent physicians and a forensic psychiatrist on the day he reaffirmed the trust. All found him competent. A recorded statement showed Hollis explaining its history and admitting that he concealed its existence from his children. Preston watched the video without expression until his father said, "My family believed Haven Cross was valuable because of the land. Isaiah understood it was valuable because of the people who had nowhere else to go." Celestine whispered that the recording was manipulated. Judge Merriweather heard her and asked whether she wished to testify under oath. Celestine became silent. Then Cedric introduced a different attack. He claimed Isaiah had exploited Hollis's guilt over the wartime rescue. He described their relationship as one of emotional dependency. He suggested Isaiah used his medal and military history to pressure Hollis. "Mr. Monroe made himself indispensable," Cedric said. "He controlled residents, staff, and eventually Mr. Vale's access to the property." Isaiah listened from the rear row. Althea stood. "My client did not make himself indispensable. The Vale family repeatedly refused to perform the work and then resented the person who did." Judge Merriweather asked Isaiah to take the witness stand. Preston objected because Isaiah had not been formally listed. The judge reminded him that his own attorney had just made allegations about Isaiah's conduct. "He may answer them." Isaiah walked to the witness chair with a slight limp. He swore the oath and placed the wrapped medal beside the microphone. Althea asked him to describe Haven Cross. He did not begin with money, buildings, or trust documents. He spoke about residents. Sergeant Lorna Keats, who arrived after losing both legs and later became the residence's employment director. Mateo Rusk, a mechanic with a brain injury who needed 6 months to remember his daughter's phone number but eventually opened a repair shop. The widow Renee Talbot, whose husband died by suicide after being discharged from treatment, and who later created Haven Cross's family counseling program. Isaiah remembered every name. "Did you ever ask Hollis Vale to transfer the property to you personally?" Althea asked. "No." "Did you receive salary as trustee?" "No." "Did you profit from donations?" "No." "How much of your own money did you contribute?" Isaiah hesitated. "The amount is in the records." "Please answer." $186,000 over 30 years. A murmur moved through the gallery. Preston leaned toward Cedric. Althea continued, "Why was the Distinguished Service Cross in your pocket today?" Isaiah unwrapped it. "Because it was listed among the Trust's founding property. During the first fundraiser, my mother placed it in a display with photographs from Darwan. She said people might believe rich men made promises when they saw what those promises cost someone else. Mr. Vale later removed it and kept it in his safe." "Did you give him permission?" "No." "When did you recover it?" 3 months before he died." "What did he say?" "That he was returning what he took." Althea looked toward the Vale family. "Was he referring only to the metal?" "No." Cedric cross-examined him aggressively. He asked why Isaiah had not publicly challenged Hollis's claim of founding Haven Cross. Isaiah said exposing Hollis might have endangered donations before the trust was properly protected. Cedric suggested that meant Isaiah willingly participated in a false public narrative. "Yes," Isaiah said. The answer surprised everyone. "I told myself keeping the doors open mattered more than whose name was on the plaque. Sometimes that was true. Sometimes it was an excuse because I did not want another fight." Cedric asked whether Isaiah believed he deserved control because he saved Hollis's life. "No." "Then because you contributed money?" "No." "Because you worked there?" "No." Cedric spread his hands. "Then what exactly gives you the right to tell Mr. Vale's children what they may do with property connected to their father?" Isaiah looked at him. The trust agreement, the law, and 30 years of their father signing documents he hoped they would never read. Judge Merriweather lowered her eyes briefly, hiding what may have been satisfaction. The hearing lasted 6 hours. At its conclusion, Judge Merriweather froze all attempts to sell, mortgage, relocate, or alter Haven Cross. She restored Isaiah's access as interim trustee and prohibited the Vale family from communicating directly with residents. "The court has not yet issued a final ruling on ownership," she said, "but the evidence is more than sufficient to prevent irreversible harm." Preston rose. "Your Honor, the property costs nearly $4 million annually to operate. The Vale estate cannot be forced to support it indefinitely. The preliminary accounting suggests the trust holds substantial independent assets. Those assets came from my father." Althea opened one of her cases. "Less than half." Judge Merriweather looked at Preston. "Your assumption that all money near your father belonged to your family appears to be the central problem in this case." Outside the courthouse, cameras surrounded Isaiah. Reporters had heard about the medal. Several asked him to hold it up. He refused. "The hearing was about Haven Cross," he said, "not about turning my military service into another photograph." One reporter asked whether he felt vindicated after being removed from the courtroom. Isaiah looked toward the courthouse steps where Preston and Celestine were leaving through another door. "A person should not need a medal before people decide to treat him with dignity," he said. The quote spread nationally by evening. The Vale family changed tactics. They launched a public campaign portraying Isaiah as an ungrateful employee attempting to seize a billionaire's charity. Old photographs showed Hollis and Isaiah together, always with Hollis centered. Commentators questioned why Isaiah had remained silent for decades if the trust were real. Preston's newspapers published articles about alleged financial irregularities at Haven Cross. Auditors arrived. Isaiah welcomed them. The records showed that Haven Cross spent a higher percentage of donations on direct services than any comparable residence in the region. The only questionable expenses were payments made to Vail-owned companies for inflated maintenance and insurance costs. Preston had charged the trust above market rates through internal contracts. Althea expanded the case to include breach of fiduciary duty and self-dealing. Celestine then claimed that several founding trustees had never signed knowingly. Althea located Reverend Marcella Hume, now 92 and living in assisted care. Marcella testified by video that she watched every founder sign. She remembered Isaiah's mother, Beatrice Monroe, placing the medal on the table and saying, "My son did not survive war, so rich men could use him to decorate their promises." Marcella also remembered Hollis insisting that his name appear first in public materials. "He wanted to do good," she said. "He also wanted everyone to know he had done it." Those two desires fought inside him for the rest of his life. The most dangerous evidence for the Vail family came from Nolan Crestwick. Unlike Preston and Celestine, Nolan was not Hollis's child, but the son of Hollis's deceased sister. He had spent years benefiting from the family without being trusted by it. During discovery, investigators found that Preston had asked Nolan to remove boxes from Hollis's private archive after his death. Nolan believed they contained tax records. Instead, he discovered correspondence about Haven Cross. One letter from Hollis to Preston was dated 8 years earlier. It stated clearly that the property belonged to a trust and could not be sold. Preston replied, "We can resolve the technical ownership after you are gone. Isaiah will not have the resources to challenge us." Nolan had kept a photograph of the letter because he feared Preston would later blame him. When confronted under oath, Nolan surrendered the image and agreed to testify. Preston's claim that he had never known about the trust collapsed. Celestine had known too. Emails showed that she commissioned a private investigation into Isaiah's finances, hoping to find debt that could pressure him into approving the sale. Investigators found none. Isaiah's house was paid off. His lifestyle was modest. Most of his income had gone to his mother's care, Haven Cross programs, and educational funds for residents' children. Frustrated, Celestine suggested creating a conflict of interest allegation. Her assistant refused and preserved the email. The final trial began 9 months after Isaiah was removed from the courtroom. Courtroom 14 was full before sunrise. Veterans arrived in wheelchairs, on prosthetic limbs, with service dogs and beside families who had lived at Haven Cross. Judge Merriweather prohibited uniforms and medals from being used as demonstrations by either side. "This court will decide documents and conduct," she said, "not who can create the most patriotic image." Isaiah appreciated that. He kept the Distinguished Service Cross in Althea's evidence case. Preston testified that his father frequently changed his mind and used charitable promises impulsively. Althea showed him contracts reaffirming the trust over 28 years. He claimed Hollis was manipulated by Isaiah. She showed him recordings where Isaiah urged Hollis to involve independent trustees and reduce personal control. He claimed the property had always been maintained by Vail funds. She presented bank records showing contributions from veterans organizations, founding families, grants, and Isaiah himself. Finally, she placed Preston's own letter on the screen. "Isaiah will not have the resources to challenge us." "What did you mean?" she asked. Preston looked toward his attorney. "That litigation would be expensive." "And you expected expense to decide ownership?" "I expected the estate to defend its interests." "Even if those interests were not lawful?" "I believed they were." "Then why did you say the technical ownership could be resolved after your father was gone?" Preston did not answer. Isaiah testified last. Cedric asked whether he hated the Vail family. "No." "Do you forgive Hollis?" "That is not relevant to ownership. It is relevant to your motive." Isaiah considered it. "Hollis did brave things and cowardly things. He saved Haven Cross more than once. He also hid the people who built it because praise was easier to share in private than in public. I do not need to turn him into a villain to tell the truth." Cedric asked whether Isaiah wanted Preston and Celestine punished. I want them unable to sell homes from under injured people because they prefer luxury apartments. That sounds like punishment. Accountability often does to people who expected permission. The judge issued her ruling 3 weeks later. Haven Cross was a valid, independent charitable trust. The Vale estate had no ownership interest in the land, buildings, or trust assets. Isaiah Monroe was confirmed as chairman, subject to the oversight structure established by the founding agreement. Preston and Celestine were found to have interfered knowingly with trust property. The court ordered them to repay inflated fees and legal costs. Evidence concerning attempted document destruction and fraudulent billing was referred to prosecutors. Nolan was not charged because of his cooperation. Judge Merriweather's final remarks were brief. She looked toward Isaiah, then toward the medal sealed inside the evidence box. This case began with a man being removed from a courtroom because others assumed his clothing, occupation, and race revealed the limit of his importance. A medal interrupted that assumption, but the court's duty is not to require proof of heroism before recognizing a person's right to be heard. Mr. Monroe would have deserved access to justice if he had never served a day in uniform. The documents prove his legal standing. His conduct proves only that the people who dismissed him should have listened sooner. Preston left before reporters could reach him. Celestine remained long enough to issue a statement saying the family respected the ruling while disagreeing with its interpretation. Within months, prosecutors charged Preston with obstruction, attempted fraud, and misuse of charitable funds. He later accepted a plea agreement requiring restitution and community service. Celestine resigned from the family foundation. Nolan gave up his inheritance from the Vale estate and accepted a minor administrative role at a nonprofit unrelated to the family. I need to learn how organizations work when people cannot call their uncle, he told Isaiah. Isaiah did not offer him a position at Haven Cross. Forgiveness did not require immediate trust. Isaiah returned to the residence the evening after the ruling. Residents had hung a banner across the entrance, but he asked them to remove his name from it. Instead, they replaced the old plaque that named Hollis as sole founder. The new plaque listed all 7 original trustees: Hollis Vale, Isaiah Monroe, Beatrice Monroe, Reverend Marcella Hume, Captain Dorian Pike, Leland Orr, and Soraya Bell. Beneath the names appeared one sentence: Haven Cross was built by people who believed recovery should never depend on wealth. The Distinguished Service Cross was displayed inside the residence for 1 week, beside the trust agreement and photographs from the first fundraiser. Isaiah then removed it. A young resident asked why. People were staring at the medal instead of reading the names, he said. He placed it inside a secure archive with his mother's handkerchief. On the display table, he left a copy of Beatrice's original donation check. It was far smaller than Hollis's contribution, but it represented nearly everything she had. 2 years later, Haven Cross expanded without selling its land. A medical university leased one unused building for rehabilitation research. A cooperative workshop provided employment for residents. The property's operating costs stabilized under independent management. Isaiah refused requests to rename the residence after him. He appointed Lorna Keats as executive director and reduced his own role gradually. A place built around one indispensable man has learned the wrong lesson, he told the board. Judge Merriweather visited once after retiring. She came without ceremony, wearing a plain coat, and asked Isaiah to show her the chapel where Hollis reaffirmed the trust. They sat on the back pew. I recognize the medal because my father received the same decoration, she said. He never spoke about it. Isaiah nodded. Most people remember what happened around the medal more than the medal. She looked toward the wooden cross. Did I change the case by noticing it? You changed the moment. That concerns me. Why? Because I wonder whether the bailiff would have stopped if it had been a bus pass that fell from your pocket. Isaiah considered this. Probably not. The judge looked troubled. Then the system failed before I corrected it. Systems usually fail quietly, Isaiah said. That is why people call the correction dramatic. On the 30th anniversary of Haven Cross, Isaiah stood near the entrance while families gathered beneath the old trees. He was 60, his limp more visible, his hair almost entirely gray. A new group of residents arrived that afternoon. One man hesitated at the door, embarrassed by the assistance he needed. Isaiah held it open without asking for rank, medals, or proof of sacrifice. "You belong inside," he said. Years earlier, Hollis Vale had survived because Isaiah entered a burning vehicle when every instinct told him to turn away. Decades later, Haven Cross survived because Isaiah entered a courtroom where powerful people had already decided he did not belong. They tried to remove him before the judge could hear his name. The medal that fell from his pocket forced the room to look at him differently, but it did not create his courage, his authority, or his right to speak. It merely exposed how much respect the room had withheld until it saw proof that the country had once called him a hero. By the end of the case, the Vale family lost the property they had never owned, the residents kept their home, and the court recognized what Haven Cross had known for 30 years. Isaiah Monroe was not a disposable employee standing beside another man's legacy. He was one of the people who had built it, protected it, and paid for it long before anyone thought to ask his name.